Why do so many men over 50 resist the very habits that could make them healthier, happier, and more connected to the people they love? It's not because they don't care. It's often because the models of motivation they've been given don't fit who they really are. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast, where we explore the science, stories, and strategies behind living a longer, healthier, and more purposeful life. I am your host, Dr. Jeff Armstrong, an exercise physiologist with a passion for making science simple and life better as we age. My guest is Bezich, healthcare executive, author, and men's health advocate. His latest book, Saving Men from Themselves, 20 Proven Tactics with a New Approach to Healthy Living for Men Over 50, challenges outdated views of masculinity and offers a model built around purpose, relationships, and emotional connection, not just willpower. In this episode, we'll talk about how men can take charge of their health, break cycles of avoidance, and build the kind of life that truly supports aging well. Lewis, welcome to the Aging Well podcast. You've spent decades working in health. I say decades like you're old, but you've been pretty experienced in working in healthcare leadership and men's health advocacy. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you think so many men over 50 struggle to prioritize their own health?
Well, in terms of my own background, I have held a number of positions in senior leadership and executive management over my career, initially in the public sector, and now most recently in the last 20 plus years in the private sector. And for the last 15 years, I've been a senior executive in a large Southern New Jersey healthcare organization, healthcare system. And it's been a great experience. I'm not a clinician by background. I come to you today as a men's health advocate, and we can talk about that. That came through some learned experience, or I should say some lived experience of my own as a single dad many years ago that found me looking at healthy behavior as an antidote to deal with the stress of raising two children. But ultimately, when I got into healthcare about 15 years ago, I realized that the state of health in the United States, both men and women, is not really where it should be. And amongst the different groupings of individuals, men 50 and or older are probably the worst cohort when it comes to taking care of themselves. So that's what really prompted my advocacy for men's health, starting many years ago.
So you talk about resistance to healthy habits not being a knowledge gap, but more of a motivational gap. What does that mean in practice?
Well, what it means is that I believe that a large part of America, and 50 plus men in particular, don't see the value proposition in leading a healthy lifestyle. And that's why my approach, which I think is distinctively different, again, based on my lived experience, is that we need what in business we would call a value proposition, a return on the investment, because a healthy lifestyle takes an investment of time and consciousness and effort to do that. And we don't see that. But men in particular have a lot going against us. Jeff, as we grow up, oftentimes men, through the conveyance of masculine values from our dads, see healthy behavior as particularly going to the doctor, as a sign of weakness. If you go to a doctor and you acknowledge that there's something wrong with you, then that in many cases is seen as a sign of weakness and not being, quote, manly. Just suck it up and it'll go away, whatever it happens to be. Well, of course, that's ridiculous, and we know that that's not the case. But those perceptions still linger on to this day, and so that conveyance continues to plague us. And other men, surveys will show with, getting a doctor's appointment is a pain in the butt, et cetera, et cetera. So, when it comes to some of the most basic functions, we've got this, this lingering cultural masculinity working against us. When it comes to lifestyle, another important element of healthy behavior, that's where the value proposition, falls short. And so my approach is to use to rely on the social sciences, that psychology, psychiatry, and sociology that are behind behavior change, because that's what we're really talking about, Jeff, is changing behavior and having the willpower and the discipline not only to change your behavior, but sustain that healthy behavior. And that's where the motivation comes in. There's a lot of literature out there and a lot of science that tells us that with the proper motivation, we can sustain a healthy lifestyle, and that, health and happiness, our relationships can go a long way to creating and providing that motivation. I'll just give you one example. Perhaps the most famous and continuing research on men's health comes from the Harvard study on adult development. Jeff, it started back in 1938 and continues today. What 80 plus years of research has told us is that the stronger and the healthier your relationships are, the more likely you are to live a healthy lifestyle. And so and what does that mean? It means that you find purpose in life, you find excitement in life. And there becomes your value proposition, the why to go ahead and sustain that healthy lifestyle.
So we talk a lot on this podcast, and I talk particularly in my teaching as a college professor, that we often talk about people needing to find their why to change behaviors, but more often than not, it's a problem of finding out the why not, and that seems to be kind of where you're going with the book. And so, how do we begin to challenge those questions of the why nots, and what happens when men start to shift from a more performance-driven identity to one that's more rooted in purpose and connection?
Yeah, you're so spot on, Jeff. The inclination is, okay, it's my New Year's resolution, for example, right? We've all been there. And I'm going to go out, get a gym membership, going to buy some running shoes, going to start eating healthy, pick a diet and stuff. And my, read of the literature and of the science is that before you do that, that's all good, but before you do that, step back and think about what's most important in your life, right? And maybe do that in conjunction with a loved one, right? Is it your children, your grandchildren, right? Do you want to have a better sex life? What do you aspire to do that will bring fulfillment and meaning in your life? Think about, inventory that, right? Again, one of the things I've done, like I talk about, running the numbers, right? Do the math. I know when my oldest grandson will be 21 and likely, in my mind, graduate from college. So that's a milestone for me to shoot for. You want to do things like that so that then turns into your purpose, right? There's your motivation to want to not only live, but live healthy. Because as you probably know, Jeff, in this country, we have a growing gap between our lifespan and our health span, right? While we're living longer as Americans, the quality of our lives doesn't match up against that. So we can't frolic with the grandchildren, and we can't, maybe fulfill all the aspirations that we look to do. So, my first, piece of advice, again, this approach that I take, again, evidence-based, is to build your motivational platform. So inventory what it is that's important to you, and then also not only identify your social agenda, if you will, but then put together what I call your sustainability plan. What are you going to do every week, every day, every month of the year to sustain the fires of motivation? Is that a weekly dinner with your spouse? Is that, a once a year vacation with the children? Whatever it might be, you want to have something that parallels what you've got to do on the physical activity and diet side. If you're expecting to go to the gym every day or several days a week and whatever, you want to be able to anticipate some social activities in your life on an ongoing basis that fuels the fire of motivation and gets you into those routines, healthy habits and routines that ultimately, and again, you probably know this, if done right, then when you don't lead a healthy lifestyle, when you stop exercising or you neglect your diet, you don't feel right. So you want to get to what I call, the mountain of healthy behavior, where it all comes together.
Yeah, and it really fits with the theme that it's kind of emerged over the first 4 seasons of this podcast, is that, we're starting to talk more about transformational aging. And that brings me to your book, Saving Men from Themselves. In the book, you outline 20 proven tactics Can you kind of walk us through a few of those, maybe all of them if you like, that can help men get unstuck and take more meaningful action?
Sure. Well, one of the key themes here is that it's more than just diet and exercise, right? Yes, diet and exercise are at the core, and you want to follow the guidelines that say you should really do cardio workouts, and then resistance training. That's sort of at a centerpiece of it, and then of course lead a healthy diet. I like to follow what we call a Mediterranean diet because I advocate for that because it's got flexibility. It doesn't mean that you can't eat meat ever, right? There's some flexibility there, which I think as a practical matter would be attractive to a lot of guys, right? But in the book, I talk about, again, building that motivational platform and enhancing our relationships so that we have the motivation in the first place. So, for example, I talk about communication. Now, why would you, in a book about healthy lifestyles, talk about communication? Well, communication is central to sustaining and having fulfilling relationships, right? So if you need those relationships to provide motivation, and guys, admittedly, probably not the best communicators in the world, right? That's one area where we fall short. So let's work on our communication skills and realize that the ability to communicate with a spouse, with a child, whomever, with a buddy, can really enhance that relationship and in turn provide that motivation to live healthy. I also talk about, the power of laughter. Laughter can be a very healthy practice. And so we want to do that. Optimism contributes to all the sciences that contributes to good health. And so, yes, diet and exercise are part of it. It's at the core. But, again, the science suggests, and frankly, our American experience suggests, right? Not to digress, but, we spend more money on healthcare in this country than any industrialized country in the world, Jeff. And do we have the best health? Are the Americans the healthiest people in the world? No, we're not. In fact, we're middle of the pack. So we're spending all this money, middle of the pack. We have gyms and fitness centers everywhere, right? But yet less than 5% of Americans lead a healthy lifestyle. While there's a little bit of progress now on overweight and obesity because of the new GLP drugs, upwards of 70% of Americans are obese or overweight. So what's wrong with this equation? And that's why in the book, what I suggest is that we need to look at other factors that will motivate us. So that's why communication, laughter, developing our relationships, is in the book along with diet and exercise, right? So that's, some quick thoughts on the, what I characterize as a different approach to healthy behavior.
If you're enjoying the Aging Well podcast, be sure to like, subscribe, or follow on your favorite platform so you will never miss an episode. And if you find our conversations helpful, please share the podcast with a friend because aging is something we're all doing and we're better at doing it together. And support our guests in this podcast financially by visiting the affiliate links in the episode description below and use the links or codes provided for discounts on products we have vetted and feel comfortable recommending to our valued viewers and listeners. Thank you. And now back to the podcast. We started this podcast with 4 pillars for health and aging well, and that was exercise, physical activity, diet, maintaining healthy body composition, and not smoking, because that's what just emerged from my years of teaching pathophysiology and exercise. And over the course of the 4 seasons, we've added sleep in there, which is a critical factor. But more importantly, we've really kind of what's risen to, and I'd say sleep and purposeful social connections have really moved above exercise, which is a hard thing for an exercise physiologist to say, is that there is something more than exercise in our health and longevity. And you're spot on with the idea of relationships being a key motivator. So how do we begin to build or strengthen relationships, and how can that actually improve health outcomes?
Well, I'll give you an example. It could start, because I get this question all the time, because I talk about in my first book, and I carry the theme over into the new book, Saving Men from Themselves, that women, I call them the most valuable players in the game of men's health, because they can play such a critical role. And, so I get the question, well, what is that role? What can they do? Or should they just nag their spouse into healthy behavior? Well, of course not. But there are several things that a spouse or a gym buddy, an adult child can do. And number one, that is also lead a healthy lifestyle. You probably know that the science suggests that if you have a partner of some type that is with you in this healthy lifestyle that also leads a healthy lifestyle, the chances are increased dramatically that you'll be able to sustain those healthy habits, right? So if you've got a spouse that supports you, like fortunately like I do, it makes a big difference in how you approach things. And I think speaks to your point about, the social dynamics behind healthy living. The other thing that I talk a lot about these days is, from a parent's standpoint, is setting a good example, being a role model, right? We want to reverse this crazy cultural notion of masculinity as being one that says, we talked about before, going to the doctor is a sign of weakness, and God forbid mental health. Well, that's
Right.
off the table, right? So if those of us, I always challenge, I've got, Jeff, what I call a tough love approach. Sometimes I offer to my 50 plus brothers, and that is, guys, number one, it's not all about you, right? Believe it or not, there are others in your life that care about your sorry butt and would like to have you around, right? And one of the key things in that thinking is that you can be a role model for your children and your grandchildren, perhaps. So if dad or granddad, is okay, just like having a beer or two, watching the NFL game versus, feeling the need to drink a six pack because that's a sign of masculinity. Maybe we convey that and let our children, grandchildren know that, look, if you're under stress or you're feeling anxious, talk about it with somebody. It's okay. It's a good thing. I mean, we just had, while we're taping this yesterday, an NFL football player, I think he was 24 years old, committed suicide. Suicide among men in this country is out of control. Men represent 50% of the population, but 80% of the suicides, 4 times, the amount that women have. So there's a lot of things that, going back to your social point, a lot of things that we can do as men and with the support of our spouse on the social side to really influence our whole approach and our whole thinking when it comes to healthy behavior.
And we probably have some men listening to this now, like, I'm in my 60s. It's too late. I'm too old to change. So for that person that says it's too late to change, where's the best place to start?
Well, to acknowledge and to recognize that the science will tell us it's never too late, right? Whether you're a couch potato or in terrible shape, haven't thought about exercise for a long time, the science tells us that it's never too late, that you can make a difference, right? So that's number one. It's never too late. Number two is, again, I would go back. It's not all about you. You can bring not only meaning and purpose to your life, but you can have a positive influence on the lives of your loved ones. So think about who else. It's not just yourself. What about the other people in your life? And to get started, yes, number one, see your physician, right? Understand where you are in your physical state, and then work with your doc to build a healthy lifestyle and a plan. You don't have to start fast. Start slow. Go gradually. That's what all of the clinicians will tell you. And don't be afraid to recognize that, you'll fall off the wagon, right? Something will happen and you'll miss a couple of days of working out, whatever. Get back on it and keep going. It's like any other behavior change. It doesn't happen overnight. But with the proper support, build a loving constituency, ask for help. It's okay. Get others engaged in your lifestyle, right? But understand that it's got that value proposition I mentioned before, a longer lifespan, a healthier lifespan, right? Quality time with loved ones, travel, encore careers, whatever it is that you aspire, there's a common denominator among them all. You know what it is, Jeff, right? It's having the physical conditioning and the physical state to do what you aspire to do.
So you mentioned earlier about the gap between lifespan and health span. How do we begin to reframe that conversation for men?
Again, it's much like some of the things we've mentioned. Number one, that it exists, and it's not just about living longer. It's about having a fulfilling life where you've got the physical capacity to engage and achieve whatever you aspire to do. So again, I would tie it back to the value proposition that's there. I would tie it back to enjoyment, fulfillment, and I talk a lot about it. It's not just about the men, but from a personal standpoint, do you want to sleep better? Do you want to have a better sex life? Yes, there is sex after 50, right? It's okay. All those things that just make our quality of life better are possible when you are in better physical condition. And so that's, I think where guys get started. It's the recognition that it's not over, that it's never too late, and then building that motivational platform like we spoke before, and then gradually with the consultation of medical experts, building a plan for yourself.
So along with that plan, how do lifestyle habits like sleep, stress, emotional health, all those types of things fit into this new model?
Well, again, when I mentioned before that it's more than just diet and exercise, there's what's kind of exciting to me, and I talk about in the book, is that there are a number of things that we can do to improve our health, right? It's getting good sleep. It's exercising outdoors and getting outdoors. Again, the science tells us that the benefits of running outside versus inside on the treadmill, which I straddle myself, living on the East Coast where in the wintertime, sometimes we have to go inside. But getting outside has great benefits to it. There's a ton of I'll give you another one. Cold rinse, right? You're in the shower, we all like a nice hot shower, lather up, but if you can do a cold rinse, turn that water as cold as you can take it for as long as you can take it, you'll feel great when you get out. It's like getting, supercharging your day. So whether it's a cold shower, good sleep, exercising outside, they're all things that would, be complementary, if you will, Jeff, to, the standard, gym time at the gym or running and weightlifting and things like that.
And a lot of this seems like it is really just habit stacking, where we take one thing at a time. You mentioned a cold shower. It's something I've been doing lately. I forget how long I've been doing it now, where it's just, and it shortens up the shower for certain. So I'm saving water for one thing. Yeah. And, you don't have to sit there waiting for the water to heat up. You get your shower done, you get going with your day. Yeah. And it does. It really recharge. It just gives me a good charge for the day. Stress is one of the things that I find is quite challenging to deal with because we're all under a lot of stress. And we know cortisol levels are just through the roof because we're on our screens all day. We're not getting the right amount of sleep at the right time. And just so much of life. I mean, anybody that says they're not stressed right now is heavily medicated, I would believe, right. Because we're all under stress. And so all that works against us. And so it's important that we do focus on trying to just take one little habit at a time and try and, how can I reduce this stress or deal with stress a little bit better in this situation? And so what personal experiences led you to devote your life to this work? Well, as personal as you're willing to get.
Oh, sure. No, I recently recorded a TED Talk and spoke, directly to this point because I kind of stumbled into men's health and healthy behavior. Glad that I did, but it was, kind of just life circumstances. When I was in my 30s, I became a single dad with two boys under my roof, a seventh grader and a second grader. So all of a sudden, putting dinner on the table, packing lunches, doctor's appointments, dental appointments, and doing laundry became, part of my daily routine, in addition, of course, to my day job, right? That didn't go away. And so that became my priority. It was very stressful, a lot of, anxious points and moments. And I found myself just by coincidence turning to exercise as an antidote. Because when I would take a jog. I felt good. It cleared my head. It made me feel good and gave me the energy to keep going. It also made me feel good and energized me because I knew that I needed to be and wanted to be there for those two boys. And so they were a great motivating factor. And I thought that, well, if I can stay in shape, then that'll give me, the energy to keep up with these kids. And it kind of worked. And then what happened was, as the kids grew up and graduated from high school, went off to college and lives of their own, I found that the longer I sustained those healthy habits, the more I enjoyed them. And what started as a coping mechanism for me and an antidote became a passion. Right? And I really enjoyed it. So if I missed a day working out, or I, didn't eat something that was totally, within the diet regimen, I didn't like it. I felt uncomfortable. And so I knew I had really gotten there. And that's what really sustained that's how I got started. And that's how I began to sustain the healthy living. And then, as I mentioned, when I got into healthcare and I looked at the numbers and saw the research and said, oh my goodness, particularly for men over 50, the worst cohort, right? I said, it didn't have to be like this. My own experience taught me that that it's never too late, that you can, that there's a real fulfilling, feeling that you get and energy that you get. And now, as a 70-year-old, still working full time as a healthcare executive, I'm able to, keep up with my younger colleagues here at work. I'm enjoying now, fulfilling times with my sons who are now adults and have children of their own. And I spend time with my grandchildren. So, I just have been lucky enough to kind of stumble into it, but now see both from a personal standpoint and from a healthcare standpoint that there's so much opportunity out there. There's so much life to be lived. And, I want to, that's why I wrote the books. I want to share that experience with others because it's fun, it's fulfilling, and, you feel good.
I often jokingly tell people that for me, exercise is like the person who's taking a 2x4 and smacking himself in the forehead. And you say, why are you doing that? Because it feels so good when I stop. But the reality is that might be the initial reaction to exercise and healthy lifestyle. But once you get into that habit, it is so hard to get out of habit because, like you said, you can't eat crap food anymore because what used to be really delicious, we just had Halloween. We're recording this in early November. It's not going to air until January, but you're tempted to eat that candy that's in the bowl, and then you taste it and it's like, oh, why am I doing this? This is nasty compared to like eating dark chocolate or healthier desserts and everything. And exercise, if you stop exercising, you feel a lot worse than you do in that 30, 60 minutes a day that you might be exercising. Yeah. And so it's just a matter of getting going with it. And so if every man over 50 could take just one small step today, what would you want that to be?
Well, I guess there's a number of things, but if you had to boil it down, I think it all starts with that motivational platform, right? To realize that it's worth the struggle that we just spoke about. It's worth the investment of time. There's so much benefit to yourself, to others in your life, right? So build that emotional platform. Think about, what's most important in your life. Translate that into daily, weekly, monthly, annual activities. So you have a strong social calendar so that, you're reinforcing things. I know one of the points you made earlier about, the time of year we're at now. So pretty soon we're going to be into the holiday season, right? Very hard to, stay on point with it, with the diet, the exercise program. A lot of stress. Oftentimes, what do men do? With a lot of expectations for men during the holidays, right? We put up a tree, perhaps buy some gifts, just put up the lights, whatever it might be, and that can be stressful and create a lot of anxiety. So it's really important to be able to step back, perhaps say no to certain. Maybe we don't have to go to 5 holiday parties. We can go to 4 or 3. Maybe it's okay to just have one cocktail instead of 3 or 4, and do other things that sort of translate that so we can stay happy and healthy during those periods of time. Because if you can do it then you're it's a good test, for the year-round discipline you'll need to kind of stick with it.
So you talk a lot in the book about the role of relationships in all of this. And it sounds like from your personal story that you may not have had a tremendous amount of direct personal support. You're a single father, young kids, so it's not like you have teenage kids that are supporting you, pushing you along the way. How do we manage that if we don't have those relationships around us? And if we do have the relationships around us, how can partners, family members, and communities support men in their journey?
Yeah, no, great question. And yeah, I'm on marriage number 3. It's been 17 years. In fact, I just wrote about it in Philly Voice, an online publication. I read a couple of columns a month for. But marriage number 1 failed. That's where I had my 2 children. That crashed and burned. My second marriage, for no reason of my own, ended up crashing and burning. And so, in the middle of taking on the single parenthood role, I was trying to rebuild my personal life and had a lot of struggles there. So I guess the point I try to make when I speak to men is that it's not easy. And look, our personal lives and our personal circumstances can throw up a lot of roadblocks and make it real difficult. That's life, right? It's nobody promised us the cakewalk here. But that said, if you can find a spouse that, and again, when I wrote about my third marriage, it's doing great, and I've got a supportive wife, and she's just the best. I try to convey that to folks, just like it's never too late for dying. Well, it's never too late on the social side of things, right? Whether that's developing relationships, a marital relationship, whether that's finding friends in the general community, friends at work, friends in your social connections. There are a lot of opportunities out there. Again, they're not easy. I've written a lot about the challenges of men making friends, right? Because once we get past our high school buddies, maybe our college buddies, again, men are not the social beings that women are. And so it's almost like a marketing effort to market yourself and make friendships, and maybe some of those friendships could evolve into a gym buddy and other support personnel to do that. So it takes a little bit of work, but if you can find that support network, you can do it. And also in between, that's where, again, if you can focus on the end game here, a lot of my conversations with men are about the end game. That's those social aspirations, right? That's what gets you through and gets you going when it's not, when you may not have a gym buddy or a supportive spouse. So.
Yeah, and I think for men that are approaching retirement, I think it's important to understand that when we leave the workplace, a lot of those work relationships are going to disappear because those aren't necessarily close personal friendships. They're really more acquaintances that you don't realize until after you retire that those relationships are gone now. And I have a friend just visited recently in Colorado, in Denver, Colorado, who, as we're kind of walking their dog, he's telling me how, he's struggling he's been retired for 5 years and he just doesn't have those friendships that he had at work. And he realized that those work relationships are kind of gone and you have to make new relationships. And we men are not great at making friends. I think
right. No,
it becomes a lot more challenging.
Yeah, no, you're again spot on. That's why loneliness is such a big issue these days in the United States, men and women, but particularly for men. And because we're not great communicators. And again, that's why in the book, I devote time to communications and building relationships. And that's not just, it's just not romantic relationships. That can be all sorts of things. And Jeff, what it really comes down to is, like everything else, it's got to be a conscious effort, right? And, for example, I've written about, categorizing relationships, right? You maybe there's guys that, are your gym buddies, right? There's other folks that are more socially oriented, you go out to dinner with or go have a drink with. Not every friend has to be an all-purpose friend kind of thing. And because that's how life is, and that's how people work. So it may sound sort of overcomplicated or over the top to sit down with a piece of paper and say, okay, to your point, I'm going to be retiring. I may not see these fellows that I work with on a regular basis now all the time. How can I backfill that social void that's being created here? Where would I go to, and how would I go to find other friends? Is it are there social activities in town? Are there clubs I can join? Are there organizations? Volunteering can bring a lot of access to folks of common interest. So again, like everything else, it takes some dedicated time and purpose. But again, the rewards are there.
So what are you doing personally? This is a question we ask of all our guests. What are you doing personally to age well?
Well, I get to the gym at least 6, sometimes 7 days a week. This time of year, it's the fall. And so in the Northeast where I'm at, there's a lot of 5K runs on the weekend. So I'll be running in a 5K with my adult son this Saturday. So, I get to the physical activities that I need to get to. Obviously dietary, I follow a Mediterranean diet. Like I mentioned, I try to be as disciplined as possible. Look, do I have a little tiny cookie maybe once in a while? Of course. But, overall try to stick with that. And then I like my social agenda. I work hard all week, and and my wife will tell you, I like to get out to dinner on the weekends. It's NFL season. So a couple of weeks ago, went with a buddy of mine over to see our Philadelphia Eagles here in the part of the country where I'm at. So there's I find there's plenty to do. It just, again, it takes a conscious effort to kind of put that together. So, for me, it's both maintaining that social calendar that gives me that drive and purpose, as well as, carrying it out day in and day out. And I'll give you one little tidbit that I write about in the book and talk about a lot. And that is, habits, routines, and rituals. I love, getting up. I get up at an ungodly time of 4:00 in the morning, but between gym opens at 5, right? But between 4 and 5, I'll shave. Although this is by the way, for Men's Health, this is my Movember, Men's Health growth. This probably will come off in December. So, although I see you've got one, so
yeah, it's just easier to leave that going there.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm still getting used to it. But I get up in the morning, shave, read the paper, think about my day ahead, and just kind of have a cup of coffee. I love that. Just 1 hour. Then I go to the gym and then come back, grab some breakfast, and go to work. So, but my route, I'm a creature habit. Maybe I'm a little type A when it comes to that, but love it. But I just find it very fulfilling, very calming. It sort of gives me a perspective on the day, and the kind of thing that I just offer as an example that you might not be a morning person, maybe you're a night person, whatever it is, but carve out that time for yourself, ground yourself, and again, use that to sustain healthy habits.
So you're up at 4 a.m. Do you have a bedtime at night? Are you pretty regimented about bedtime?
Yeah, I've got to hit the sack by 9:30 at the latest. If I push it beyond that, then you feel it on the other end.
Yeah, it's a little hard to get that 7 hours of sleep if you're getting up at 4 and you're staying up until 10, 11 o'clock.
Yeah, so. No, I can't do that unless I know it's it's the weekend or something like that, and then I can sleep later.
Yeah, I'm big on bedtimes.
Oh yeah.
So,
yeah. But
about the
that's a good regimenting your bedtime it helps you sleep. I don't know about you, but when my head hits that pillow, there's not a problem. Falling asleep.
Yeah, and actually, when you're regimented, it's easy to get up in the morning too. I mean, I get up usually between 4 and 5, and I can't sleep much beyond even 5 o'clock. If my body, I just naturally wake up just before 4 o'clock, and sometimes it's like, okay, I'm going to get a few more minutes of sleep. But yeah, that regimen is one of the most important things I think we can do for our health, and it shouldn't be that hard for men to be early to bed, early to rise. You're near Philadelphia. That's what Ben Franklin taught us, right?
Yeah. And what your listeners need just to reinforce, if you feel good, it's a good thing.
So where can the listeners find your book and connect with you and your work?
You can get the book on Amazon, or even maybe even quicker on what's called bookbaby.com. You can learn about what's going on in my world of men's health and healthy behavior on social media. You can reach me at Louis Bezich, and my website is louisbezich.com. That's
pretty easy. So what is your vision for men's health culture in the next decade?
Great question. There's a lot to be optimistic about. I've read a lot of research that suggests that younger generations are paying more attention to their health. Work-life balance seems to be a growing sentiment among young people in this country. So that's good. There seem to be, consistent with that, more open attitudes among young men to seek help for mental health problems. We've had examples in the NFL and elsewhere in this country where, NFL players, we had a guy named Lane Johnson from the Philadelphia Eagles a couple of years ago who acknowledged that he had depression, whatever, and huge support from his teammates, and admired for his courage to come forth and do that. So those are the positive signs. On the other side, we've still got a culture of toxic masculinity that's out there. Scott Galloway's new book that just came out, which I just got the other day and want to take a look at it, about, the challenges that boys have, and the gap between the ability, the academic gaps between boys and girls, and how that can, filter onto problems as an adult with drug addiction and depression and other problems in life. And so there's a lot of pushback still in our culture to sustain that, that macho, masculine definition, which I think is off point, that suggests that, again, it's weak to go to the doctor. It's a sign of weakness to admit any kind of a mental or physical problem. So there's some headwinds working against us, but I guess in the end, I like to be optimistic and will believe that as our new generations really look into the science, as they look into the benefits of healthy lifestyle, that will change that curve, and fathers will convey to their sons that it's okay to acknowledge that you need medical care, physical or mental. It's okay to share your thoughts. It's okay to be vulnerable. Because that's how we are as human beings. And I think that's probably the most important thing going forward that I share with men all the time.
That's really great advice. So is there anything that we missed talking about that you want to make sure that the viewers and listeners get to hear from you before we kind of sign off today?
Oh, gosh. Well, we've covered a lot of good stuff, man. You're spot on with the stuff.
Thanks.
I guess I would just maybe emphasize the point for my 50-plus brothers that it's never too late, that, despite how bad you may think your situation is, it's worth the investment. It's so worth the investment. What you'll be able to do and experience is really worth it. To not only yourself, again, but to others.
And we'll just end on that. Just keep doing what you're doing, keep educating us older than 50 men, and keep aging well.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Aging Well podcast. Please like, subscribe, or follow, and share this episode with a friend. And be sure to visit the affiliate links in the description below. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep aging well.